All right, let's go ahead and get started. Aloha mai kako, mahalo for joining us today. My name is Lisa Ka'anoi, and I work with the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program at Papa'olalokahi. It looks like there are about 30 folks joining us online. So e komo mai, let's get started. I'll go over some housekeeping first. So this webinar will be recorded and will be shared with everyone that registered. And for the attendees, you're unable to view each other. However, the panelists are able to see the list of participant names. If you have questions or if you have comments or feedback, you can use either the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar or the chat feature. If this is your first time joining us for our webinar, you will automatically be added to our email group for future presentations. And also for future reference, if there's a webinar that we are hosting that you would really like to see but are unable to make it, as long as you register for it, you will receive the recording approximately 7 to 10 days after the presentation. Then after this webinar is over, there will be a survey that pops up. Would be really appreciated if you could complete that for us. However, since our webinar is an hour and a half long, and if you have to run, that's fine. We will send up a follow-up email to see if you can share your mana'o with us at a later date. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers, Dr. Alyssa Honda and Dr. ʻŌiwi Chun. So Dr. Honda was born and raised on the island of Oahu. She graduated from Kamehameha Schools, Kapalama campus in 2006, Santa Clara University in 2010, and then John A. Burns Medical School in 2017. She recently returned to Hawaii after finishing her pediatric residency training at Stanford Hospital. She joined another Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program alumni, Dr. Jasmine Waipa, at their new pediatric clinic called Keanuenui Pediatrics. She is excited, they are both excited to serve the keiki of Hawaii. Now for Dr. ʻŌiwi Chun. He also attended the University of Hawaii, John A. Burns School of Medicine, and he is also psychiatry and neurology, child and adolescent psychiatry certified, board certified. And his professional interests are Native Hawaiian health, child and adolescent psychiatry, pediatric neurodevelopmental orders such as autism, ADHD, and intellectual disabilities, and also in cross-cultural psychiatry. His personal interests are in his family, Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian heritage and history, traditional Native Hawaiian health practices, ukulele, mele Hawaii, and travel. So before we start the presentation, I just wanted to take a poll, and you can do this anonymous. This will be anonymous. And we just want to figure out, get an idea of how many folks have children. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it now. And I believe if you're on your phone, you're unable to vote. Wow, all right. Give it a couple more seconds and then we can see the results. Okay, here we go. So almost everyone has children, mostly 1 to 2. Wow, some have 7+ children. How do you find the time to be on this webinar? Oh, good mixture of ages. Okay. Very interesting. Okay, now let's do the second poll. And this is for our grandchildren because we know that folks are that live in multifamily households. Let's do the second one. Oh, lots of young grandchildren. Mostly in the 1 to 2 grandchildren. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling and then share the results. All right. Oh, shucks, I answered no keiki. Okay. We'll do that for the next poll. Okay, mahalo for participating. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Honda.
Aloha kako, everyone. Lisa, thank you so much for giving myself and Dr. Chun an opportunity to kind of present our mana'o and our experiences with adolescent health, and especially during this pandemic. And so huge mahalo to everyone that's here as well. For all of you that have multiple children and multiple grandchildren, I give you major kudos for all that you do and for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. But I do want to go ahead and share my screen with all of you. Okay. So the topic of today is to just talk about adolescent health and how adolescents and teens have been impacted during COVID, because as you know, teens go through a lot alone. Pretend the pandemic didn't even happen. And so we just wanted to kind of emphasize all the data that's coming out and some of our own personal anecdotes as well to kind of help us all understand what are the challenges they're experiencing and what are the ways we can help them. And then Dr. Chun, as you've heard from Lisa's bio about him, is well-versed in Native Hawaiian culture and health. And he's gonna add his mana'o on how COVID has impacted our Kanaka Maoli and especially our teenager Kanaka during this time of COVID, and how they're trying to deal with their own cultural identity and still trying to assimilate into a Western culture. So just a disclaimer, Dr. Chun and I are not the ultimate expert. We've studied for a very long time. We went through a lot of training, but we're always understandable that everyone goes through their own situation. Everyone has their own story. So we all have our own mo'olelo to tell. And so this is just more so of myself and Dr. Chun telling our own mo'olelo. And so our objectives for today is we're gonna kind of start off just reminding ourselves on what it's like to be a teen. What are the different stages of development that teenagers have? Because we kind of group them all together, but actually there's 3 different stages. And then Dr. Chun will talk about Native Hawaiian health and what it's like to be a Native Hawaiian teenager, especially during COVID. And we'll really delve into, I think, much of the talk, which is how COVID is impacting our teenagers. We'll even touch base on the vaccine since it's been in the news for a while. And then we want to end on a positive note and discuss how we can help these teens overcome these challenges. But first, story time. So I want all of you to kind of we're going to take 10 seconds, and I want you to think back to when you were in high school, whichever that is. And so actually take a moment, and I can't see the chat, but jot down in the chat box or Q&A which high school you went to, just because that's such a Hawaii thing. And while you're doing that, also think back of maybe 2 memories that you can remember from high school. And I'll put 10 to 15 seconds right now for everyone to do that. I wish I could see the chat, but I'll look at it later. But I hope you kind of have those 2 memories. I wanted to share 2 of mine. So I went to Kamehameha Kapalama campus and graduated in 2006. And here's a photo of one of my favorite memories in high school, which is in our senior year, we won the state championship for girls varsity soccer, which may not seem like a big deal, but it was a big deal to me because my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, we lost to a very good school that everyone knows of has the colors of blue and yellow. But only one team got to go from ILH to states. And when we finally got to go my senior year, and we took it all the way to the championship and won, such a big memory to spend time with my teammates and my friends and my family, and really put that milestone in my memories forever. And then I also wanted to share prom, which is where you get to have fun with your friends and you get to go out and go dancing and really have a good time. And then I also got to meet my my spouse, my high school sweetheart, who I'm still with and married to today. And we forever made memories since then. And then I want to turn over to Dr. Chun to share a little bit of his ko'umo'olelo at this time.
Dr. Chun?
I'm here. I just gonna get off the. Oh, here, start my video. Okay. There we go. All right. Aloha. Thank you guys for letting me be involved with this presentation. I greatly appreciate it. So these were kind of memories that I had. I had my wife help me pick out some pictures of the past for me. So I'm a 95 grad from Kamehameha schools. 2 pictures to start off on the right-hand side, where I was the boys director or the men's director for our song contest from our sophomore to our senior year. So that was very memorable for me with it, especially our junior year with it. It was a pivotal year for us as a school. You know, this was the years as we commemorated the overthrow. This was the kind of the years that we were starting to learn about our how important it was to be a Kanaka Maoli. How was it to grow up into a society of being Hawaiian and being into this Western society. So, you know, it was definitely pivotal. And right before song contest, I had appendicitis. About 2 weeks before, I had surgery. So there was a bit of concern if I was going to actually be out there and being able to actually be our song contest director. So that was a bit scary for everybody. Especially my alternate, because he wasn't out there, and he was my best friend. So he was kind of not feeling too well about it. But I did get up there, and we did pretty good. We won. I think we won our men's. We won the language, and we won our music award. So that was great. Above is my grandfather, one of the most core people in my life. I grew up with him and my grandmother. They spoke Hawaiian to me up to I was 7 years old. I was fluent with them in Hawaiian to about that age until my grandmother passed away. So they were very pivotal in my age, in my life. So again, that was a core thing for me is on how to balance being Hawaiian and being a teenager in our Western culture. And talking about being teenager, as Dr. Honda was talking about finding out about partnerships and everything. That's when our first love, our first talking about who we like and things like this. So, I didn't know my wife yet. At that time, I met my wife when I was in medical school. But I kind of like people. I liked a person at that time. I actually liked someone from the 7th grade. And you know what? As a person that I was very anxious, I didn't talk to more than my people, my best friends. We were like 2 or 3 people. And you see me in that chair with a bunch of roses. So you can kind of think about where this story is going to. So as a teenager who thinks that, you like somebody and what do you do? So I was in the band. We went to London. This other person was in the band with me. Think of me as a junior. I play tuba with it. My friends play trombone. We're all they're ragging me about this person that I like. I've never talked to this person before now. So it's just a person that I'm infatuated and I just like this with it. So I decided I'm going to get her a bunch of roses and almond roca with it and give it to her. So my bunch of friends rang me to go get this. Her bunch of friends know that I got this. And so after this picture, I go up to her floor with her bunch of friends. I give her her friends these roses and a bunch of almond roca, and that's it. Don't say anything to her. Didn't do anything else. I finally talked to her after I graduated and said hi to her. I had a 5-minute conversation. But again, this is what you do as a teenager sometimes. You think that you have some type of thoughts about how you like people or what you think of what is love or anything, but you do things that may not be the most appropriate or the best things of life, and it takes you somewhere that you may or may not have done when you're 43 years old. But that is what teenage is about. So these are just 2 memories that my wife would let me talk about during our presentation too. So,
huge mahalo, Dr. Chun, for sharing that with everyone. I love seeing everyone's photos. And I hope, as you're hearing to my story and to Dr. Chun's story, that you could also picture yourself back in high school. And so now take a moment to just think about, what if none of this could have happened? What if Dr. Chun didn't get to take those roses to kind of establish a memory for him or be able to lead song contests, and for myself, not being able to hang out with my teammates or being able to meet my husband and going to prom. It would be quite different. And as you will learn, peers and these experiences are a huge part of adolescent development. And so we're going to kind of segue into that right now. And then just kind of bring an overview of what the development is like at the different stages of being a teen. And I think most of you share that your children are the teenage years, so 11 to 15. So Dr. Chun will first kind of talk about this Erikson stage real quick.
Yes, so Kalamai, as we put this, as Dr. Honda and I kind of worked together to put this together with it, we as a pediatrician and myself as a child psychiatrist, we have a lot of things that we do in common with it. And so we were trying to melt our presentation together. And unfortunately, things that I thought were my part of the presentation were not, and I kind of overtook Dr. Honda's part. So I changed some things of hers. So I apologize to Dr. Honda on that. So this was one of those things. So the Erikson stages, there's a lot of ways that you can characterize adolescent development. And we could spend a whole semester, 2 semesters on the different ways of doing it. But we only got about half an hour, an hour to do it, and would love to just chit chat and more on your guys' questions. So for Erikson stages, the really important parts that I really wanted to look at is the three ones that have an arrow over it: the school age, the adolescence, and the early adulthood. These areas are kind of the span of where early, middle, and late adolescence kind of go through. We're talking about the development of a lot of identity, your physical attributes, how you look at the world, what are going on in your mind, your intellectual, cognitive ability. All of these are going on. Adolescent is an explosion of many different things that are happening right now. So in school ages, we're looking at more at what we call now the tweens, and so the 10 to 12, 13 years. These are type of the early ages of adolescence that are forming. This is what we would call kind of the competence, the industry versus inferiority. You know, this is, am I good enough? Am I competent? You know, this is the time of building up that kind of foundation of my resources, of being who of being that more of the intellectual ability, can I compete with my peers or be with others? This is as we get into that and getting into kind of the standing on my own. This is kind of the time where you see a lot of the adolescent pictures of being rebellious, wanting to be by yourself, with it being, I know more than you kind of thing. And then you're getting into the middle age of adolescence, of the identity versus confusion. So this is more of the middle age of now being a little bit more mature, still thinking I know more, but being a little more open, less of being more open to your peers, wanting to be more included with your peers. Peers are very important. So there's a lot more emotional connection. This is where you start thinking about not only peers as a group, but peers as a partnership with it. So that is where now abstract thinking is coming and life becomes a lot more complex with it. Late adolescence, now you're getting into the 17, 18-year-olds, late teens, early 20s. As we know, our brains don't fully develop until 25, 26 years old. So these are all when the late adolescence is happening. This is where, you know, identity is coming to solidifying, and identity comes from everything from who we are, and who we are is huge. It is where are we going to go, and after we graduate, what are we going to do with our lives, our partnerships, what is our identity in the sense of politics, of gender, of spirituality. All of these things makes us our identity. So these are things that are coming to solidification during our late teens on it. So this is where Erikson stages kind of come into play during adolescent time. But as you can see, Erikson stage expands all of life. But for today, this is kind of where I wanted to pull out with Erikson stages. But Dr. Honda is going to talk about kind of the other part of Erikson stages where, of adolescent overview, where we kind of talked about the early, middle, and late stages of adolescence.
So if we think about the early adolescence, we can play a game again where you can think back to when you were like 5th, 6th grade and 7th and 8th. So think back to what you were doing at that time. And for those of you who are parents, I just want to emphasize, as Dr. Chun and I are talking, to just keep some of these things in mind and never take things as personally, because 90% of the time, it's not what you're doing as a parent necessarily. It's more so just how these kids are developing. So try not to take things too personal. But during this early adolescence, as Dr. Chun was talking, look at this picture here. You know, I don't want to listen. I think I know what I'm talking about now. I know it all. You know, I'm 12 now. They tend to always roll their eyes, or they think that they know more. They're really reliant on their peers. Friends are huge during this stage of development, and they always want to start hanging out with their friends. You might ask them how school is going. They'll just say something like, fine, and that's it. Do know that it's nothing against you. This is just them. And they tend to have very concrete thinking. It's either black or white. good or bad. There's no gray or in between. And although we all wish that's how simple life was, they're still in that part of their thinking. So they don't quite know how to think abstract just yet. So if we go to the middle adolescence, if you keep playing your game with me, now put yourself in high school again. So what were you doing? How were you thinking? And see if the things I'm about to say remind you of how you were or someone you knew. So during this stage, now their independence, they want even more. I want to be able to do stuff a lot more on my own. Friends are still super important for them. Peers mean everything. They rather be hanging out, and they really start comparing themselves to others, which helps them kind of, as Dr. Chun was talking about, that identity of who am I in this world? And they start to kind of think more abstract. So what does that mean? So it's very big picture thinking. Okay, so I'm in high school, so where do I want to go to college? I think I might want to be a professional athlete or a doctor or a pharmacist or a nurse. And so they start thinking about those big picture thinking, but they're not quite good at it yet. They still need your mana'o, they still need the parents' help as well during this stage. And then the late adolescence, if you're a parent, many of you are, this is the point where you can feel like you're valued again. So if you have the patience as you have a teenager, during this stage, they get even better at abstract thinking and risk benefit. Okay, if I decide to do this during college, then maybe it'll help me in my career. They get better at that. Romantic relationships did start in the previous one, but it really takes hold during this time point. And then I think they really start to value their parents again. So they kind of come full circle. So if you're able to have the patience and keep telling yourself, okay, it's not me as a parent, it's just how they are and how they're developing. I know when I went away to college, I realized how much I relied on my parents and how much they did for me. And so they kind of circle back and start to see you more as a role model and a mentor, versus maybe earlier they could have been irritable and wanted to hang out with their friends more. So take it away, Dr. Chun. I know you have some awesome things to say on this next slide.
So it's kind of a summary of, again, what Dr. Honda is saying, and kind of bringing up the central questions of each of the stages. Again, with early adolescent, that concreteness of, am I normal? Am I like everyone else that is of my peers? Is this, I'm breaking away from my family because this is not about me being my family anymore. It's me being of my peers. And so again, I'm comparing them to the people of my age. And so again, this is the hardest time of parents and of their teens, their tweens with it. And just like Dr. Honda says, most of us, when you are dealing with your tween and teenager, you want to pull out your hair, I can imagine with it majority of the time. And so again, taking that breath and knowing that it isn't you, it isn't them, it is just the way of development a lot of times. And we Dr. Honda and I will kind of go over some tips later that we can kind of help through, which a lot of it I think we probably have known, but kind of going through it again will kind of be helpful. Middle age, again, middle adolescence, again, is going from the am I normal to who am I? Again, it's that identity, trying to see how do I belong to the peer group? How do I interact? How do I assimilate in more so? Because now it is not that I'm only normal, but how do I relate to all? And then late adolescence is now knowing that it's okay to be who I am. It's okay to be unique. It's okay that I'm not exactly the same as the next person that's sitting by me. I can go to the next step. Where am I going? How do I make myself? Who am I and where am I going to be? And these are the greatest things. And then, as Dr. Honda said, when your kid, your teenager is good with him or herself, he is able to then be good with the ohana, with the family, and be able to interact again with community, with the family. And then there's that quote unquote peace again with everyone. And we're all feeling good with each other again with what we're doing. So again, these are kind of the central questions that we're noting. So sorry, yeah, we can go past that one too. So, sorry. So the next section was about the kind of being us as being indigenous people, Native Hawaiians, being Hawaiians in our own land, but in this Western culture of a quote unquote haole way, the Western way of life that we've been inducted into now. And this, and in a lot of ways, we still have the threads of traditional ohana, the traditional Hawaiian ways that are in our way of life that we do. So, kuleana o opio. So with the ohana, each one knew where he stood in the family rating system. So again, this is about knowing where your place is. And again, a lot of it is knowing who is the oldest, who is the youngest. We may have that unsaid, but you know, the favorite for grandma or grandpa. You know the rules when you go to uncle's house, what they expect. You know what you're supposed to do when you go grandma's house, and how you're supposed to honi hu, and what you're supposed to do as soon as you get there. The older brother's supposed to make, you know, or the oldest cousin is supposed to make sure you watching everybody outside when all the aunties and uncles are talking story with everybody, you know, and nobody's supposed to go in the house, kind of thing. So, but we also know that we get these lovely iPads and iPhones and Androids and everything now that kind of get stuck in the way, if we say. And so that has changed a bit more of how we interact. And so these things of how do we put things together that people still have their roles, but we use but we still have these Western influences, and how does that take away or become barriers, or how do we use that to positive influence our ohana now? Next slide, please. So hanapono. So again, these are, how do we do good work? How do we work together? What are these? And again, these are things that you probably heard at times in your own life, you know, and now, you know, they look down at science. A lot of times now about keeping our eyes down, look me in your eye. I mean, I don't, there's a lot of times that even when I was young, when you were, you know, when your parents scold you, look over here, look here, kind of thing, you know. Or even now, when you're in school, a lot of kids, a lot of people who are local kids, when they're upset or when they are hila, if they're ashamed of something, they look down with it. And if you are not from the islands and not culturally sensitive, and you're a malihini or a teacher that's not from here, you may misunderstand that, you know, this is not a rude, that is not rude for the keiki, the teenager might not be rude to you, but that's part of our culture with it. Same with being ha'aha. Again, some teenagers may not want to answer in class. Some teenagers may feel that they may know the answer, but they are taught to be quiet with it. And then they may feel stupid. They may feel that, well, everyone around me are answering and I'm not, but I know the answer, but I just don't feel confident enough. And they might feel unconscious. They might be an unconscious thing that they don't know that this is part of our traditions with it. Again, these are things that are innate to us with it. And so again, this conflict between our Western way and who we are as traditional Hawaiians with it. And so these are things that we're waiting for. Now, a lot of us don't have poibos more as we eat, but the sense of, again, how many of us do actually eat together as meals with it, of it. But it's the sense of, when does the ohana, the family coming together with it? We're all so busy with it, even in my house with it. We may not have a dinner where mom and dad and kids sit down at one point. But in our traditional time, that was something. And when it was together, everything was put away. There was no negativity. We ate in a positive space. No phones, no nothing. Poibo open, we are all together being in a positive light. So again, these are things that we are taught as Hawaiians, but may not be in the same light as we are seeing in the 21st century. Hospitality, again, the way we are is is to be aloha open, and not, especially in COVID right now, we cannot be as open as we are. So this is the difference of it. I like this, kanaka makua. Now, I haven't put a lot of references, but a lot of this is from Mrs. Pukui's Nana Iki Kumu book, and a lot of, again, from my own being raised by it. But a lot of the wording is definitely from Ms. Pukui's. Kanaka makua, and it's he doesn't, or a lot of the he is from their taking out from her reading, but it is he and she. So it is not just for the male. So again, where this comes from is, if a question was, what would make you, parent or grandparent, proud of your grandchild or your kid? You know, today we might say, oh, what would be great? Oh, I wish our kid graduated, our kid go to college, or our kid did this type of job, went here, et cetera, et cetera. This is what we, as a traditional person, would look at as what we would want our kid to strive for. You know, again, be level-headed, to control temper, to be able to kind of think through things with grace, and with able to kind of have that ability to be sensible with it, but also to have that emotionally warm-heartedness, to have the hospitality with it. So again, as we get through this of it, you're seeing how the Native Hawaiian concept of self versus the Western style of identity or self is a bit different. We're looking at a self in a Hawaiian set, is that a self, to be pono, or to be good with yourself, you need to be good with those around you, those that are your family, your community, your aina, your land, your spirituality. And so again, the concept of lokahi, this harmony that is with you. And so this is where the self is. This is the self concept of, we are only good when everything around us is good on it. And so that, I believe, is can be a very it can be a very battle for some of our teenagers on it, and an unconscious battle for it, where you might be having, again, this resurgence of what is Hawaiian, or your ohana is practicing, or unconsciously practicing certain traditions of being Hawaiian, or even just the unfortunate cultural trauma that Hawaiians and their families have to deal with. And so this is where, again, the things besides just being a teenager and the chaos of puberty and everything else that social development is going through, us as the indigenous people go through this too, as as a society and as teenagers themselves. So again, this part of where I wanted to bring out is just, again, what are we as what do we, or as parents, these are what our kids are going through and what we need to help them balance through the ideas of self as a Kanaka and self as a Western teenager. And that balance of, it's okay of that troubles that they might have at times. And we are here to give them that support, because we all have gone through it at some point of our lives too. We may never have known that at that time, but we all have been through that journey too. So this slide, the next slide, kind of just again gives a pictorial view of that that journey of lokahi, that who we are as a self, and how important to be good with ourselves, to be pono with ourselves. You have all of these other things that need to be aligned: the family, the aina, the environment around us, and our spirituality of it with it. So, mahalo. So I think I get so again, this first part of it kind of just again goes on the individual versus the collectivism or the ohana. So again, we are taught by the adolescents, or the Western way of adolescents and Erickson, being by yourself. You're important. You're trying to find your identity. You are trying to fix yourself. You know, am I normal? How do I belong to everyone? And how do I, now I'm good with myself, now I can move on. While ohana, or the Hawaiian way, is I'm always working about how do I make sure everyone around me is good, and that then I can be good myself. So again, what we're looking at here is, again, we live in a dominant Western society. That's just how it is with it. And many indigenous societies have this challenge with it. Our schools are mostly a Western way of operation. The communications that our children go through are definitely influenced on the way of the Western world, and our homes. Everything around us have that. So by doing that, again, there is a lot of that assimilation of going. So there is always that battle. And so how do you keep that battle in balance? Because as things have shown, is when you tip the scale too much one side and they don't have that support, or they feel that they are lost, and they feel that they are by themselves, being a true Kanaka, being a true person of their culture, but are singled out in the Western style by their own peers, then they feel lonely, and thus that thoughts of depression and anxiety and the inability of being able to feel connected can overwhelm them. And unfortunately, these are when these thoughts of hurt and the actions of suicide or attempted suicide can grow. And as Dr. Honda will show later on, the data on the unfortunate parts of where Hawaiians, we are at the tops of some of these demographics. Again, where this comes from Nanaike Kumu, about a lot of Hawaiians, teenagers and families, we see this disconnection of where Hawaiian teenagers are one that will see them kind of very much disconnect from the family early on, and have a lot of not have a lot of connection until very late into adolescence or into adulthood. Sometimes we don't have a lot of connection back because the Hawaiian culture or heritage drives a wedge into it, because they don't know, or the family doesn't know how to balance, or that conflict between the balance. So again, we are trying to figure out how can we make it that this is a good way of being able to melt everyone together. How do we live today in the society that is given to us, but not to forget who we are with it? Again, just ways that we are able to, that are things to think about on what makes it hard for us. The not being able to, and again, I think we're seeing more and more positivity, but again, the cultural heroes of that are in the past and also here in the future, in the present, who are there that our Hawaiian teenagers can see as role models? Who are there in Hawaiian teenagers can see in the past that have been kind of the people they can look up to? You know, if they don't see them, they don't see that, they say, why do I go back? Why do I look for my culture? How come my culture is so important to me? And then we see that they might reject that. They might see that the dominant culture is much more important than the quote unquote minority culture, our Hawaiian culture, right? So again, it is that balance of how do we make sure that they are comfortable in their cultural experience that they have of the Western culture, but also remain embedded in their mother culture, their Hawaiian indigenous culture that they have.
And such a huge mahalo to Dr. Chun for even sharing all of that. And I know we took that time to really explain the development of adolescence and really the Native Hawaiian culture. And I'm so appreciative of having Dr. Chun's mana'o on that, because in order to really understand what's happening to our teens today with COVID, we really had to take the time to understand where we came from as Native Hawaiians. Where did we come from, you know, as a teen, as we developed, and really to understand this next part. So huge mahalo to that, Dr. Chun. Thank you so much. We're going to transition into more of that Western thought process, where we're going to have a lot of data and a lot of articles that are going to show. But I just wanted to play this video for you. Instead of me telling you how teens are feeling as we delve into mental health, I'd rather them talk about how the pandemic has affected them themselves.
The biggest challenge for me during this time is finding the motivation to keep my sleep schedule and my work schedule consistent.
The biggest challenge for me during this time has been reaching out to people and staying connected. I always fear that that's going to be the last interaction I have with them.
There are so many things that I've wanted to do, and now I don't have an excuse not to do them.
It's challenging to focus on my schoolwork because working in my room is really distracting.
When we had school, I had a strict schedule that I stuck to every single day. And now, I don't even have a schedule at all. Because of this, I started to lose motivation to do even this little things like homework.
I'm usually really busy and I do a lot of things to have fun and keep myself motivated, and I'm really sad and disappointed to miss them.
I miss being able to go and visit my baby cousins on the holidays. And just the thought of never being able to do any of that ever again is scary.
So keeping that in mind as we talk about these next parts. Yeah, so the mental health, and good thing we have a psychiatrist like child psychiatrist like Dr. Chun on this call. But we're gonna kind of talk about, this is just kind of an overview of the statistics, but I think we'll kind of delve into the different articles that we found. So mental health is one of the most important things, I think, that are really coming out in the light as far as the news and whatnot, and how teens are affected. And so that's why we felt we'd spend a lot of the time on the mental health aspect and then talk about schooling as well after that. But in the Journal of Pediatrics, it did do a survey on the well-being of parents as well, right? Because the health of our keiki is the health of the parents. It's reflected both ways. And so I thought it was important to share this. So they took this survey of the parents in June, so a few months after the shutdowns, and they asked them to, okay, think back to March as your baseline. And then they analyzed the physical health, so their physical well-being, the mental health of the parent and the child. And these are some of the things that they found. Granted, they asked, the sample size was like about 1,000 parents. So that's a pretty good number of who they asked, and children less than 18 years old. And what they found were that 27% of those 1,000 parents did report that their own mental health got worse. 14% of them reported that the children's behavioral health worsened. And in those families that really struggled, they looked at a bunch of different things. Did they lose health insurance? Did they lose their own job? Do they have food insecurity? Now they feel they're worrying about paying their own food. But interestingly enough, almost 50% of them, or 47.6%, lost childcare. And that really impacted them. And for us visual learners, if we did it in more of a graphic form here, on the left side, you can see, so this looked at more of the physical impact, whether it was better from March, no change, or worse. And the dark is the child and the light color is the parent. So there's not much change in this study, we'll get to this later, in the physical well-being. But in the mental health aspect, not as much significant change there for all the parents that were reported, but you can still see there has been a little bit of a difference as far as before and after during COVID. And you may be wondering, okay, well, what about the teenagers? So there was another study in Australia. So we can't really apply this to our own population in Hawaii, but just to give you some of the demographics, half of them were female, 82% were Caucasian. And again, they did another survey at 2 time points. And this is more so for our teenagers. So this is the teenagers answering these questions. So for a year before, and then 2 months after the shutdown started, and they transitioned to virtual online learning, they looked at depression and anxiety. Are they satisfied with their life? How has their peers and their families and relationships been impacted? And this bottom bullet point, I just want everyone to kind of take a close look at. There was actually statistical significance. So that means like a p-value of less than 0.0001 that they found that showed that there was increased depression, increased anxiety, and they weren't as satisfied with their life. And what I didn't put on this slide was between the two genders. And I think sadly, most of us could assume which gender was impacted most when it came to this, but it was mostly the females that experienced this during the pandemic. And I wanted to give another visual as well. So they also asked these same teenagers on a scale of 0 to 10, they asked them, okay, what's most stressful to you during COVID? And here are all the scenarios that they told them to rank. And so at the top of this list is what they felt was most distressing to them. And then at the bottom was least distressing. I just want to highlight a few things: friends, 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 extracurricular activities, and social events. And I didn't box the family, so I call them for that, but they're more worried about not seeing their peers and not being able to do things and go to their social events, or for their family from getting hurt. But if you look at the bottom, so they weren't as worried about them getting ill or catching COVID or dying from COVID. And that could kind of go back to our development of teens, where they're not thinking too much on how they're really going to get impacted. They're more thinking about what they really want and what's important to them. And so they kind of felt like maybe they were invincible, but that's just me drawing conclusions. But I thought that was very interesting from this study. And so like, why does this matter? Why do we talk about some of this with mental health? Well, if you think back to what are the top 3 causes of death in our teenagers, number 3 is suicide. So I put the graphic in here too. This data is a little old. It's from 99 to 06, but it was on the CDC's website. But you can see majority, so 48% is from unintentional injury. What that means is like motor vehicle accidents. But then you have homicide, so gang violence is involved, and then suicide, so mental health. And as Dr. Chun has mentioned, especially with our native Hawaiian culture and trying to assimilate in Western culture, sometimes can be add an additional stressor to these pandemics. And so the risk of suicide can go up. And then if we transition to school, so let's take that same study that we discussed with the Australian one, where they talked to the teenagers and they said, okay, tell me 3 things that you were most concerned about with the virtual learning. They talked about technological difficulties. So it's hard for them to even get the technology. They weren't motivated. So if we were together right now, I'd have all of you raise your hand, or I'm going to ask this question, raise your hand in secret, I guess, wherever you're watching. But raise your hand if you are someone who has a difficult time working from home or studying at home or learning at home. And I'll pretend that I could see all your hands. And then, you know, it's hard, you're so distracted, there's snacks, there's a lot of things going on outside, someone's cutting the lawn, there's a helicopter flying outside, and it's just difficult to stay focused. And then they felt like they couldn't understand the material. So this would be another opportunity I would have if we were all together. But, you know, raise your hand if you're a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner. If you're just with you and the screen, it's hard to really get all those aspects to best help you learn or best help our teenagers learn. So it can really impact people's schooling. And then I also wanted to kind of remind people, go back to that technological difficulty. And I think a lot of us either saw this on social media or saw this in the news. And these are two tweens who basically didn't even have access to Wi-Fi. So they had to sit outside of a Taco Bell just to be able to do their own homework. This is in California. So just kind of keeping those thoughts in mind. And luckily in Hawaii, we are, you know, doing this slow transition, private school, going back to school. Some of the DOE and the public schools are trying to transition to that too. So at least we don't have to deal with complete virtual learning, but it is kind of up to the discretion of certain things depending on how we're doing as a state. And so when I was driving the other day, I passed one of the private schools and I saw this big poster outside that said SATs. It was on December 5th. And so my question I have for myself is, how are students going to perform now that they've been out of school even longer? We're not getting as much of the learning and the academic achievement that we would typically get if some of them stayed in school the extra few months to finish the year. So I think only time will tell. I would love to see what data comes out on this, if they are able to share it, but we'll see. But I did find a study, they looked at, they projected what the impact would be. So they used what happened with Hurricane Katrina and saw how those closures impacted students' performances. So this is them predicting what might happen. So this is not data from what's actually happening right now. So this is a graph. It takes some time to look at, but the numbers on the left-hand side is just academic achievement. And then it goes by grade. So it makes sense that the higher you up in grade, the better you are to perform academically. So typically in a school year, let's pretend this dashed line here doesn't exist right now. Let's say, so you usually start the beginning of the year and you do pretty well. you go up in your academic achievements. And then on the last day, so mid-June, depending on which school, it is typical that you have somewhat of a decline during summer months, unless you're in summer school, because you're not as much in it, you're not learning as much, you're not in a scheduled environment as much as before when you were in school. Now, let's go back to COVID. This is when schools closed a lot in the middle of March. So now, instead of this blue line continuing to go up where they were supposed to end, so now they're not going to end as high. They ended here a little bit lower with their academic achievement for these 7th graders. So that decline for summer months started even earlier. So they started lower because they ended lower, and now they're going to decline to even lower than where they would be, in the previous, this is a normal year. So we expect that when they start the new year, they're going to start a little bit lower than before. So this is mathematics and this is reading, same concept, but I thought it was super interesting to see these graphics. And you may be saying, Dr. Hondo, but you showed me a picture of yourself winning a championship. A lot of students are student athletes, a lot of our teenagers. And so how has COVID-19 impacted high school sports? So luckily, I was able to listen in on a webinar with a lot of the athletic trainers met this week to kind of talk about competitive play, because if a lot of them were out since March, trying to play 9 months later, you can only imagine that there's a huge risk of injury. A prime example is my 49ers team, who has struggled with injury this year. But I think a lot of the NFL teams, if you remember, like week 2, struggled with injury. A lot of key players too that normally don't get hurt. And I think it was that lack of training well, maybe they train, but not as hard because of the pandemic. And now they're trying to go into competitive sports. So we have to keep that in mind for our teenagers. And of course, I want every teenager that wants to pursue collegiate athletics to be able to get to that goal, but we have to do it in a safe way so they can play for long-term versus getting hurt so quickly. So what they're talking about, they think this in the schedule that they're working the athletics. Hawaii State Athletics team is working with the state as well and taking other measures in the DOE to really come up with the best schedule. So for those winter sports that were typically planned, they're thinking early to mid-January. So a lot more will come up. So keep that in mind for your keiki who are involved with sports. And then Abu Ma'afala is, I'm giving a shout out to him. He's a Kamehameha grad as well, but he discussed on the webinar some of the data that's out there and how we can best keep our student athletes safe. So what they are proposing is that they do this 50-30-2010 rule. 50-30-2010 rule. And what that is that for what you expect in a typical full practice, competitive, pretend COVID was not here. This is the regimen that they wanted their athletes to participate in and work out with. So say it was 2 hours of practice. They recommend that you start with only 50% of what you would have had in that practice. So instead of 2 hours, it'd be only 1 hour. And then whatever it was going to be as far as weights and for running, you would have that. So start them slow. And then you can work up to the next time. It would be only, okay, what was the full schedule again? 30%. So they can do a little bit more than they did before, and to slowly ramp them up and prevent injury, because we're trying to think long-term, right? What's best for them if they do want to play sports. Super interesting. Of course, this will be shared, but I don't want to take too much time to go into everything, but just bring up that rule. And now, so physical activity. So this is obesity. So nutrition is my passion. Nutrition is my passion. I believe that what we put into our bodies can really fuel our health in ways to prevent trying to take medicine. So I want to kind of just tell a little story with you as well of what happened in the previous month. So I was kind of talking story with one of my mentors about nutrition, because we share that passion with each other and really trying to overcome the obesity epidemic. And as we were talking, this is maybe a couple months ago, so just a few months into the shutdown. And I was like, I'm wondering if this is, with all the virtual learning and being sedentary and having to stay home, if we're going to see a spike in the obesity epidemic. And she gave me a little testimonial. Of course, we don't talk about any PHI at all, but she said that in just a couple of months, one of her patients gained 20 pounds since starting the pandemic. Now, we deal with teenagers, so most of them, and this wasn't a 1 year later follow-up, this was a follow-up in a few months to really watch the obesity and nutrition. So just in a few months has gained 20 pounds. Now, we help from 0 to 21 years old. And if any patients in just a few months did gain 20 pounds, that's significant, and something that we really want to make sure that we keep looking at to prevent any worsening diabetes or high blood pressure for the future. So in this study, they looked at the potential effects of COVID on physical activity and those who are sedentary. And so it was 5 to 13, so more of the early teens and some of our school age children. And they looked from April to May. And they asked, if there's any changes in physical activity and strenuous activity now versus when in February, before the shutdown happened. And so what they found, if you look at this graph, you can see that there's more increases with time, right? So much less means much less physical activity now. There's actually much less physical activity. But more importantly, I want you to look at the age breakdown. The dark areas is the ages 5 to 8. So the younger kiddos, not too significant of a difference, but look at our early adolescents. Boom, much less activity. And it's come to no surprise. They maybe have a cell phone, they're on their cell phone, social media more, but their virtual learning is a lot longer and they're having to do a lot more with their homeworks all on the computer. So the option to really be outside or being able to move around with physical activity is impacted. And I think what a lot of people may be wondering about, is COVID. So I just wanted to put a little blurb here, just because we are talking about adolescent health in our keiki. So the COVID vaccine, we hear about Pfizer and BioNTech and Moderna as well. But just some key points about that is that, it was a randomized placebo-controlled double-blinded. Boom, boom, boom. 3 things you definitely want to hear in any study to prevent bias as much as possible. 2 shots, 3 weeks apart, 21 days apart. Initially with the preliminary data said 90% efficacy and now 95%. Okay, that's just info, but I think for the keiki and what we really want to know, initially it was just from 16 years old and up. And when I tried to really look at the demographic breakdown, it didn't tell me just the teens, it just grouped them into 16 to 55 years old. So it's hard for me to really analyze the teenage part And only recently did they start to enroll as young as 12. So anyone less than that, they aren't even studying that yet. So the American Academy of Pediatrics is really trying to push in the most safest way how we can get this vaccine maybe available to our keiki. But it takes so much time because you need smaller doses. You really need to look at the adverse effects profile in order to make sure that it's absolutely safe for our keiki. And so they're really trying to push these people to really look at it so that we're not waiting years down the road for the keiki to be protected at the same time. A lot of negativity, I know, when we talked about that. So Dr. Chun and I just want to end quickly on some ways that we can help, and I'll let him kind of take it away from here.
So I think our help. So this is what Komako Kokua is. So the first part that we talked about is really you as the front line for your teenagers. As we saw in Ms. Lisa's poll, a lot of you are, the makua or the kupuna. You are the parents and grandparents of our keiki. So you are their front line. You, even though if they say they don't want you, they need you, and so you are there to keep them going. And these are the words that we need you to remember for them. And to be able to have this embedded in you more so that you can kind of interject this into them from you. And one of them is through parenting. Parenting is a huge subject, and and we all have different parenting styles with it. And parenting is not to be the leave it to beaver or those ways that we've seen on TV with it, because even me as the pediatrician and psychiatrist, when I get home, I don't want to listen to anybody sometimes because I just listened for 8 hours of everyone else's messes. So it's hard. So I totally understand. But we all need to be there and be a partnership with the adults in their lives with it. And you guys can read the slides of the humor that's here and what's happening with these individual parents and when they try to, talk with their children. But what is trying to say here is that, we want to, number one, talk, kuka, vala'au, be there with our children. Even though, as in the far right slide, that you might be talking to the pepa that they are putting up into their face with it. They might be having their phone there. And so we might have, again, introducing the poi bowl again at dinner time, meaning no more phones at the table. Having that we are all sitting together, and it is about practicing what we preach. So it means that we as adults may not have our phones at the table too, with it, or not answering the phones. It is also being there that we needing to calm ourselves down and making sure that we're not reacting to their reactions. And so having that calm voice, having that we can talk in that manner back to them. Because a lot of it is they need to have that role model, that examples for them. Because again, your kids trying to be adults with it. And so they might want to think that they're adults and they want to think that they know it all. But that's what they're here. That's what we are here for them. We are their role models for it. And that's what we can come about with it. Things that we want to help them to endure through these times, as these 5 things that are highlighted here. Keep their routine. As was seen in a lot of in Dr. Honda's video, a lot of it is to keep them having that routine in a time of not having a routine. they don't go to school, or there's not a physical school to go to anymore. They don't have the extracurricular things that they used to do that could glue them for a routine. So having them be consistent. You get up at this time, so yeah, you go eat your breakfast at this time. You still have chores at home at this time. You go sleep at this time. So that's important. Being connected to their friends and family, you know, just because they don't see their friends anymore, this is still okay that they can use their social media. We've been always telling them, no, stop with the Facebook, stop with the Instagram, stop with this. But you know, this is a time where we can monitor them to be on it. And it's okay to have the extra Zoom. It's okay to have that extra time to be with it. You know, we want to have them to have that connection to them because it's important for their development with it. And with that, you know, this is where we can get that comfortability to be together on it. Again, these are the things that we want to have where we can be able to talk story with them, to validate who they are. And again, when you're doing this, when they see that you are involved in with their life, they start to realize it's okay to have you involved with their life. A lot of times, the rebellion, the oppositionality, the defiance is a way to call for help, but they don't know how to call for the help. So we need to stand the ground and say, we are here to love you. We are here to stand by you, even though you might not want us here. And when you get through that and they start stopping their teenage tantrums, they will then start to come around. And that's when you feel, again, that satisfaction that things are going. But again, you're not here to solve their problems. You're here to guide them through their problems. You're here to be there through their problems. And again, this is tough times. And we're not here for you to be the psychiatrist. We're not here for you to be the therapist. We're not here for you to be the pediatrician. So you are here to be their first line, but you know, I want you to know that that's why Dr. Honda, myself, that's why we are here too. We are here to be your support. We are here for, or your pediatrician, your primary doctor are there for you to call in. And if you cannot get a hold of him, that's why the suicide prevention line is another way. Again, it isn't about you failing. It is not about being weak. It is nothing that you did wrong. It's about how can we be here to help each other to make sure we are making your family successful, that we are making your child successful. These are hard times. I just got off with a patient. I asked her, how are you doing? He said, it's 2020. What do you think? I said, that's right. It is 2020. So that's what it is. Again, it is nothing about what you are doing. This is about the challenges of life that we're having right now. So again, these things that are around us, these things that are here, again, does not reflect on the inability that you as a parent are doing. Things that are there that you are reaching out only shows the strength that you have as a parent to do. So again, these tips get you to the next step. If you need the next step, that's where Dr. Honda, myself, and these other resources are here for you.
I just wanted to add to, thank you, Dr. Chun. When I created this slide, you know, I just really, the third bullet point, I just wanted to emphasize again that, you know, they just want to feel validated. They just want to feel like someone's listening to them. So even as parents, you might not agree what they're going through is probably, if they really are depressed or really anxious, but I think just listening to them talk about their problems and validating their concerns and helping them develop a plan, which is also why I put that suicide prevention hotline on this slide, because I think it's important for you folks to have in your phone and for them to even have in their phone, even if they don't need it, just to be safe. And so I think just with the purpose of time, because we really want to get to the Q&A for all of you. I think, you know, we talked a lot of negativity with the COVID part, and we're trying to end on a positive note. But I wanted to play this video to just help you learn how some of our teens are being resilient. This is a young woman, late adolescent from Italy, and she's telling us how she's coping with the pandemic. So take a listen.
My My name is Anna Imodi. I live in a reception center. Like every other person who arrived in Italy, I gained the status of a refugee. Do you wonder what we do here? I'll show you. In the morning, I attend online classes. Like today, I'm going to be attending a French class, and it's very hectic because I have to wake up every morning. Before, I used to go out with my friends and we take a walk, get ice cream. Now, I can't do that. But who says I can't meet my friends? We have the internet, so once in a while I get connected to them. We can't get hugs, we can't get kisses. It's sad anyway, but we've learned that we should value what we have. Today I decided to cook personally, and I'm going to be cooking for me and my friends, particular African dish, and it's really yummy. And at the end of the day, I also learned that even if we are far away, we can also be very close. You are not alone. Ta-da, bye.
Yeah, so even if we are far away, we can still be close. And so, Dr. Chun, if it's okay with you, I think we can go to the Q&A part. Just to kind of allow people to to discuss with us. But a lot of information was discussed. And so we have our contact information on this slide, but even if you hover your phone over the QR code here, you can automatically save Dr. Chun and my own contact information for a future date. But mahalo nui loa for allowing us to be here today. And we would love to answer any questions or concerns or anything else that you have at this time. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Dr. Chun, Dr. Handa. We did have a question earlier regarding the Australian study where it was divided between male and female. And so the question was, did any of the studies look at adolescents who are gender non-conforming?
Great question. And, we should actually be respectful of that population as well, to be honest. So this one in particular did just do male versus female and didn't really take into account the LGBTQ population, but I haven't seen anything out there yet. And I'm sure though that there are a lot looking at that because Dr. Chun can attest to this too, that everything we talk about mental health times that by 10 for this other population. So it's super important that we should look into that.
Mahalo. Any other questions? I know that we've had some discussions around, like if they're households with, let's say multiple children, 3 or 4 kids, and that technology itself, like the Wi-Fi access, and maybe even only having 1 or 2 laptops, and then having to all be trying to study and get things done within a deadline, but yet having to share the time with when they use Wi-Fi can also be very challenging. And so it's just interesting how that may also add pressure to them to maintain school, but also make sure that their siblings have school time.
Correct.
So I feel like there's things that can be compounding when you're living in multi-family households. So how would you recommend? I mean, I don't even know if that's a question, but more of a comment that we've also been hearing from the community about how to get folks access to technology.
So I mean, yes, I have a few families that have to go through that, where they have 4 or 5 siblings ranging from second grade all the way to a senior in high school with it, and having multiple different schedules with it, and only access to, as you said, a few different tablets or computers, and even with that, the amount of connectivity versus in their Wi-Fi can only handle so much, and it can get pretty stressful for the individuals, the family, and how to juggle and what to do, and how do we sacrifice, or how do we get everyone going, and what do we do from there? So, first of all, what I try to let the family know is that you, as the family, are trying everything you can do, first of all, that you have done everything in your power with it. And that is the best you can do, first of all. And so if that's what you're doing, you are not doing anything wrong with it. Okay. So that is, you have done that. So you are doing excellent for yourself. So give yourself that credit with it. And that it is, again, the COVID pandemic has caused this issue here, has caused this strain on the family, on the system to be where it is. And so this is not a fault of yours. This is not a failure of you not providing for you. Because that, again, we have families that are doing their darndest, but it's just that they cannot do any more than what they can do for it. And so we start there first, because we want to try to de-escalate the frustration, the stress level as much as we can, because we already know that they're going to have that tension is going to come out some other way with them. So that's one thing that we do. And then we try to then say, okay, what's the next step? We can try to call the school. We can try to see what are other areas that we can try to do, and try to see if we can get other resources to that family. But in the meantime, we just say, you guys are doing well. We are trying to do whatever grades come out, again, to know that it is not your fault. The grades are just is a reflection of the pandemic, not a reflection of your child's cognitive ability, is not a reflection of where the family has done, is a reflection of the limitations of the system and the pandemic itself. And that we will work together as your resource, as your provider, as we will be an advocate for for you in the system, to make sure that you are not penalized for what's happening. So that's how I try to help them, to try to say, your hands are tied. You are doing as much as you can, and then we can work from there.
I appreciate that. It kind of recenters us around compassion and empathy, rather than us getting frustrated and them getting frustrated. So I understand now. It's a good point to listen to their frustrations, validate them, and come from a center of compassion, and that both of you are on the same side.
Correct.
So I appreciate that. We are getting close to time. We do have a couple questions, and we'll still take the questions, but if you do have to leave, mahalo nui loa for joining us today. I will have talk about a few things that are coming up. So once you receive the recording, you can jump to the end of it. But there is another question. What do you suggest to get our teens more active? The ones who are super busy with sports before, but now have none, lack of motivation to do anything active.
Great, I can address this one, Dr. Chun, because I know you also reached out to me specifically, but it's super hard. It's very difficult. And I don't have the ultimate solution, but the things that we kind of talked about at the end is what's important. So kind of trying to develop a schedule again. You know, what's happening kind of think about your teenager who you know and what they're doing now that's different from before. So that includes how much screen time they're having. Virtual learning, we can't get away from that. That's just part of the way life is right now. But are they staying up late? So like till 2 a.m. because they don't have to wake up as early to drive all the way to school? Are they always on their phones constantly on those times where it's not school? So that causes more of a sedentary lifestyle. So when I work with parents, especially when it comes to the teenagers, I always try to incorporate what the teenager expects and what their expectations are and their goals. So I would talk to your teen and say, you know, what's important to you when it comes to your sport that you were playing before? And what do you want to accomplish after high school if they're 17? And then develop just start with 3 lifestyle goals. So if they do want to play collegiate sports, then let's remind them, okay, let's do that. And then we can do like that for 50, 30, 20, 10 rule we talked about. So if, for example, your keiki was running 7 times a week for an hour, which is my kai, because I can't do that, then you want to cut that amount in half. Okay, and let's have them slowly try to ramp up again, whatever pace they were doing or whatnot. And then kind of trying to create those 3 goals, put it on the fridge or something for both of you to see. And if you write it down, then you guys can be more accountable in that standpoint. And then again, like Dr. Chun mentioned, if there's social media, allow them to maybe do this with their friends virtually. So if they, for example, I played soccer, so if I had a teammate, then we can both say like, okay, we're gonna juggle and see how many times we can juggle the ball at this time point. We're gonna do fast footwork for this a period of time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and do that together with their friends. And that can really help them try to set their goals. And then for your question about the 20-pound weight gain in a few months, what I will start off with saying is it's not your teen's fault. Again, and this is a reflection of the pandemic again. And I would focus not on the weight as a number. I never like to focus on that. Let's focus on what lifestyle changes happen because of the pandemic and what are the small things we can do to control our lives. So if your teen is snacking a ton and it's chips and soda and whatnot, and they're doing that 7 days a week, let's say, okay, let's change that to just 3 of the days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, small changes. So that way, if they don't accomplish their goal of going cold turkey to change their nutritional habits, then it's still something that they know they can accomplish and not give up. So that's what I would do is work with your teen to come up with these goals again, and let's focus more on the lifestyle. What are the healthy changes we can make versus just the weight and that they gain that, and make it a family event. Let's all walk outside together. Let's all go run together, whatever pace.
Right. We'll still take more questions. I know folks are slowly leaving. I just want to mention the next webinar with us is actually going to be on January 8th. So we usually have webinars the 2nd and 4th Friday of the month, but because of the holidays, November and December, we only had one. January is actually National Mentoring Month. So we are going to have Kellyanne Volop and Dr. Deanne Carpenter join us to talk about mentoring, and then possibly have Dr. Marjorie Mao also join us. And then also tonight, Papa Ololokahi also host their own webinars, but also co-host or partners with other organizations with webinars. So there's another one tonight at 5 p.m. In partnership with Ahakane. And it's about traditional and contemporary carving. And then the next one on December 14th on Monday is Aha Mahu, and that's about Mo'olelo with Mele Meleapana. And you can find all the Papa Ololokahi sponsored, partnered webinars on our site. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Oh yes, and the next Wednesday, Jamie Mahealani Miller, 6 p.m. So there's also, since we're talking about adolescent health, I'm not sure if folks are aware that there's a group, a ʻŌiwi of youth, that actually started a social media campaign. So it's created by youth, and they create content to send messages to other youth. And let me see if I can pull it up here, and I can share it on the screen. So this is Next Gen, and they're trying to send messages of COVID to other youth. And it's includes Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians. They just felt like when they got together, they themselves wanted to include other communities. So this is really refreshing, and it's really exciting that this is happening. So if you want to tell your kids, or if you want to follow them on Facebook, Twitter, it looks like they're on TikTok, on Instagram, this is a good resource also as well, so that your teens or adolescents don't feel quite alone. They can see others out there, how they're coping through the COVID pandemic. Are there any other questions? Comments, feedback?
I did see one question, Lisa. I think Dr. Chun would actually have some good insight into this one from Maggie Long. She says, as a nurse in the ED, we often see youth and teens coming into the ED in crisis situations and at higher rates now during COVID. For those who are discharged from the ED, for families, do you have any suggested resources to provide them until they're able to get that follow-up with their PCP or outpatient referral? I often find myself wishing I could have done more, provided more support. Are there any specific resources available to teens? Mahalo.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenging one, because you're absolutely right with the COVID. Again, it brings so much different challenges for all for our teenagers, and again, lack of their peers and the socialization. They do have so much things that are going on. Resources change from community to community. I've been out of, I'm assuming from, it's an Oahu individual. I've been out of the Oahu one. Here on the Big Island, the biggest places that I've used is I try to get them connected to, and I guess all over the state that you can, if they are an individual who has Medicaid or Quest, trying to get them through connected to the Department of Health and CAMHD, Child Adolescent Mental Health Division, is usually sometimes a good starting point. If it is, if they're having, if you're feeling that they need a little bit more assistance or support, them and or the family, that's something that they can do. Let me see if I can get the number out. But if you Google DOH CAMHD CAMHD Hawaii, you'll get all of the state's offices with it. So all islands have that. So that's always a good one to do with it. There is a crisis center, a crisis access line that we also use that is statewide. That's a good one to use. The number for that is 1-800-753-6879. Again, 1-800-753-6879. And that's, again, statewide. And so what they usually do is they can send someone to the emergency room, a case coordinator, to come and talk with the teen and the parents. And they usually can provide crisis coordination for 30 days for that. So that's definitely something. Now, again, resources are limited, and now with unfortunate furloughs that are coming that from the state, it may be more limited. So it's not, they don't come right away to begin with, especially on the neighbor islands. And so that might be another issue. I'm not sure how long we can keep them in the emergency rooms, but at least you have that. You can always give the number to the parent too. So that's something that they can always have on hand, just like the suicide prevention number. That's something they can always call to with it. And they also can call the CAMHD number on during working hours to just set up a timing. So those are some resources to use.
Mahalo. Looks like we can, we're over time. We can take one more question, and then the other questions that are unanswered I'll include in the follow-up email. But we got mahalo for sharing this link, sharing our ulu. I'll put that link in our follow-up email as well. All right. Well, mahalo for joining us, Dr. Honda, Dr. Chun, and everyone joining us, watching us. And then those, the recording will be available next week. We'll send it out to everyone, and then you can also share it with others as well. And then this will be our last webinar of the year. And we'll see you guys all next year. Mahalo for Marvin Buenafe for your kokua, for your IT support. And I hope everyone stays safe and well and enjoys the holidays as much as they can. But just malama pono, and we'll keep in touch.
Aloha mahalo.
Mahalo.